Hi, I'm Barry Rosen. Welcome to our preview of Secret of the Masters. It's actually a real class. The first class, I used to be a university professor. First class, you kind of have to give an overview of what you're going to do, and then you have to maybe start with the first lesson to give people a taste of what is going to happen in the class. So actually, it's a full class for those of you. It gets an idea of how I teach for those of you who don't know me. Going to it takes a little time for people to wander in, but a lot of people would be reviewing the video recording. So those of you who you will get a copy of the video recording. So it's up to you if you want to take notes. I find that when people take notes, they sometimes lose half of what I'm saying. So if you have time, you will get a copy of the videotape, and you'll be able to review the material. And if you sign up for the class, I'll send you a copy of the PowerPoints too. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been teaching, I've been involved in Vedic astrology since 1987, and I've been teaching classes on Vedic astrology since 2015. I have many teachers, and I'm very grateful to all of them. I pick up a little bit from every teacher that I've studied with, and I've kind of weave it into a lot of my own insights. I tend to have a little bit of a more psychological orientation, being Scorpio rising. So I like to see how astrology impacts the mind and how that affects us. This is my contact information. My website, appliedvedicastrology.com. I have a YouTube channel. There's about 52 tapes on the YouTube channel if you have, for those of you who like watching those type of things. So, and I've taught maybe 30 or 40 classes, and they're in my class library to purchase. And some people need to kind of go on their own. Live classes are kind of wonderful because you get a lot of interaction, and we'll interact with your personal charts. So today, I tend to lecture more on these first classes. In general, we have a lot more interaction in the real classes, but sometimes it's difficult to play with the controls and getting people on the mics. But I will pause at some points for questions, and we'll see if we can get your mics turned on and see what happens with that. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I have written 5 books on Vedic astrology. There's a book on Saturn, which is only electronic. There are a couple of published Amazon books, Signs of Secrets. Well, let's see, where are they here? Signs of Life from the Astrological Zodiac and Finding Your Blind Spots using Vedic astrology too. So those, no one makes a lot of money on books if you know how much work goes into a book, and they're just about sharing knowledge. So if you enjoy my teachings, you can always, and you like reading, there's incredible information in my books. I also do consultations. I've been doing consultations since 1988, and a lot of what one learns in Vedic astrology is just by doing charts and getting the experience and talking to people, and I'll share some things with you in the course. So I usually start with some Vedic chanting. So usually, it's like going into a temple. You can slip off your shoes out of respect if you feel comfortable, and you can just listen. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigam Kurime Deva, Sarvakareshi Sarvada, Dhyanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya tamasoma jyotirgamaya richoma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavatitamasttu Ma Vivishai Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Somaye Mangulai Buddhaye Cha Guru Shukrashini Bischa Rahave Ketave Namaha. Honoring the great ones, Lord Krishna, Goddess Saraswati, Vedavyasa, writer and cognizant of the Vedas, my spiritual holy tradition, all my great Jyotish teachers, and our class. So again, I'll just make this amounts couple. So the class will have 8 additional weeks, including this week. It'll start next Saturday at noon Central Time. Sometimes if I get a lot of people in Europe or India and I need to adjust the times, I might be able to move it up a little bit. But at the moment, noon's a kind of a good time for me. I do send extra videotapes with the class. I have a lot of pre-recorded videotapes, and so there are a lot of bonus tapes. So aside from 8 live lessons, you'll probably get 8 bonus lessons also. And the class will be over by August 6th, and then there'll be no class on June 25th because I'll be on a meditation retreat. So anyway, there's a copy of my book again. So let's go to today's material. So I'm calling this lesson "The Ocean in a Drop." It's kind of the seed of what we're going to do over the coming weeks. I'd like to honor all my great teachers again. Okay. So this is part of a new series that I'm developing, the series is called Secret of the Masters. And part 1 is, I don't know, I have to come up with a better title for it, but at the moment it's kind of deeper basics. One of the challenges that we have in Vedic astrology is kind of like morning dew. You know, the sun comes out and it kind of evaporates in a couple hours. My friend Sue was fond of saying that. So with Vedic astrology, we always have to kind of keep reviewing things. One of the reasons I keep teaching is because it kind of forces me to kind of, you know, remember things that I've learned and to embody them more. So in the fall, I'm hoping to teach a course on advanced dashas, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the other parts of the series about the arudas, or the most manifest level of creation. I have a 4 or 5 week class on the annual chart called Tithi Pravesh, which is very important. Another course on subtle levels of existence, which are kind of the upagrahas and other wonderful things that come up in Vedic astrology, so I'm thinking over 2 years I'm going to be doing some new advanced series to get us all a little bit deeper. The question is, what is this class about? I mean, I came up with this abstract title, and I've been trying to put it into words. I mean, I know what I'm doing with it, but I needed to put it into words. Part of the problem is that Vedic astrology is very complex, and when we learn basic rules, then we have to learn how to qualify each planet and examine them more deeply. So we learn basic things at the beginning of Vedic astrology, and we have to just even, get it in our heads. But then we almost have to unlearn the rules, because there are all these exceptions and qualifications. And so sometimes to get a chart right, you have to really kind of know all the subtle things about the chart. And so this class is really kind of to go deeply into qualifying interpretation, so that we can really understand what planets are afflicted, what planets are strong, what planets are dominating, and have a kind of a cookbook for going through charts. So today's class it's kind of like a Whitman sampler. You get a box of chocolates, you get a little bit of everything in it, and then you maybe decide you want to buy a whole box of the chocolate caramel. So today's class is more a Whitman sampler, because there's a lot of my purpose in today's class is to kind of touch on a lot of core principles and go deeper into them. And some of you who have been studying with me know these well, and some of you, it will be good to review them, and some of you may not know them at all. And the point is that we, even if we think we know them, we end up having to go spend a lot of time going really deeply into kind of uncovering kind of the subtlety of a chart. And I want to start out with, I'm using the southern charts, and I apologize that I like them because I can see the Gemini aspects better, and we're going to have a lesson on Gemini aspects and review them again. But the southern chart is a little bit easier for seeing the Gemini aspects. And I did northern charts for 30 years, and then when I learned Gemini aspects, you know, your mind goes into knots trying to see all the aspects and remembering that Leo aspects Capricorn and Cancer aspects Aquarius, and then you've got to look for those relationships in those diamond charts. It's very hard, but it's very easy, as we'll see. So this is a colleague of mine who actually had me do his chart professionally, and he was born during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think the chart date is October, November. Well, actually, we can look at the sun here. It's going to be like October 18th or something, 1962. And when we look at this chart, and those of you who are panelists and have open mics, Affy and Joy, who are my students, if you want to share anything, you know, when we look at this chart, it's, you know, this was the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So we have Mars conjunct Rahu in the first house, Saturn conjunct Ketu in the seventh house, and they're opposing each other. We have the Sun in Libra, which is not really a great place for it, in the fourth house, where it has no kind of dignity, the opposite of the 10th house. We have Moon in the 12th house, Atmakorica, and it's in the constellation of Ardra, which is, you know, a place of kind of deep suffering connected to Rudra. And, you know, Jupiter's in the 8th house here. Mercury exalted in the 3rd house. I mean, again, Joy or Affy, if you were to make comments on this chart, what would you say? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Good morning, Barry. So I would say, the first thing I would say, I would look at the ascendant and see that the ascendant ruler is in the 12th house. So there's a lot of hidden consciousness or almost imprisoned consciousness and emotions in the 12th house, but also I would notice that we wouldn't use the regular Vimshotri Dasha because Moon is in the 12th house here.
Right.
Also, I would say Rahu very closely conjunct to Mars and a very weak Mars in the first house has a lot of personal, you know, karma coming into this life. And trying to really understand and work on self. And the self is going to potentially appear very big, very confident, but inside, I would say this person probably is not confident and is working through a lot of personal and character issues. Mercury in the 3rd house, I would say that he's probably a good writer, and he's very intellectual in that sense. And there are a lot of other things, you know, quickly that I could look at. Saturn in the 7th house, in you know, its own house. I would say if he does have a relationship, maybe it would be a long-term relationship. You know, Saturn has got Digbal in the 7th house, long-term relationship, and that relationship lasts for a long time. I don't know if I don't like Jupiter in the 8th house. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your comments. One of the reasons I just quickly pulled this chart out was because, you know, if we don't know a lot of Vedic astrology, you know, and if you wanted to focus on the negative in this chart, you really could do a devastating reading for this person. Right?
Well, there's tremendous anger. I think there's a lot of pent up anger. There's a lot of kind of passive aggressive anger. He feels it kind of vacillates between ridiculous amounts of power and totally powerless. And I think that the only place he actually finds peace is probably in his home. That's probably the only place he can actually go to actually regenerate, because all of his interactions with people are oppositional. It's not an easy chart. Do you know him? Is this true about him?
I know him well, so this is why I picked this chart. Okay, so this is kind of a chart that, like you said, if you just look at the Rashi chart, you know, it looks like a mess. I mean, this is the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know. And yet, if you meet this man, actually, his life is about service. He is extremely devoted to his wife, and he lives a whole life of service. He's been deeply involved in meditation and service on his spiritual path. He's really a good person. He's an accountant, which was where the Mercury in the exalted Mercury is coming up there. But you know, if you just kind of started saying, oh, we've got a debilitated sun and we've got moon in the 12th, you know, we're missing a lot of subtleties in this chart. And again, the Navamsha chart, those of you who took the Navamsha class, you know, this Navamsha chart is very strong. Jupiter in the 10th for you know, career and teaching and Sag, Lord of the 5th in the 1st here for spiritual teaching. Moon aspecting in the 1st aspecting the 7th, and the Navamsha chart for somebody devoted to their wife. Yeah, I think his inner world may be very frustrated, but here's another case where I tell people, you know, do a lot of meditation, you can transcend your chart. You know, this is a very difficult life that he came into, and yet he's kind of transformed it in a very beautiful way, you know. So it's kind of and you know, if we look at the D60 chart, which would be a much deeper soul level of the chart, we'd see, you know, another level, you know, that would come up. And the point is, you know, I think you know, sometimes we learn things and, you know, and then we meet people and we do their charts, and then we realize that, you know, if we had to really analyze this chart, you know, Mars is a good planet for Cancer. It's Lord of the 10th and the 1st. He's very successful at work. The Rahu actually does well in Pusha Nakshatra. It's one of the places where Rahu really shines. It somehow it makes it much more spiritual because Rahu's connected to Brihaspati, the Devata of Pusha Nakshatra. So there's a lot of subtle things in this chart that are there. And you're right, Effie, long-term marriage with, you know, it's also like Ketu is devoted. And normally you would think like this Ketu Saturn conjunction is, oh my God, what a mess. But, you know, this is about a man, but Saturn has dignity in his own sign. Ketu is very devoted to his wife. You know, I'm sure could be some angry flare-ups, but you know, he survived the Rahu Ketu return where we had Saturn and Ketu conjunct, and we had this repeating actually, and you know, he's just been meditating enough that, and he's devoted enough that he's just, you know, kind of moved through so much. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that sometimes things aren't quite what they seem, you know, and we have to really kind of dig. And I would say Munat Makarka in the 1st, yeah, it's about self-knowledge, but, you know, again, it's, you know, moon is just, you know, it's very powerful. The Navamsha chart becomes very strong, especially after one gets married. And so, you know, it's, you know, very powerful. Okay. So I just wanted to quickly go over, most of you may have seen the syllabus, but our goal in the first 5 weeks of the class is to kind of review core and confusing rules, you know, getting to know and understand exalted and debilitation, planets better, and their aspects. And again, here's a that exalted Mars is not really hurting the chart that much. It actually makes him a very humble individual, and it allows him to be devoted to his spouse. So there, we have to come up with alternative ways to kind of see. I know some people get very kind of grandiose about, oh, they've got a debilitated this and they've got an exalted that, and half the time, if you don't look at 5 things in relationship to the exaltation and the debilitation, you're going to say the wrong thing. So we have to get a better languaging for dealing with that, understanding. I want to have a deeper lesson on Atmakarika. We're going to have some of that today. Atmakarika, I think, is one of the most important things to talk about in a chart. It's the planet with the highest number of degrees in the chart, and it governs the issues that are there our whole lifetime. It's one of the reasons, one of the deepest karmas that we need to work off in this lifetime. And I think it's the most important thing to talk about anytime you do a consultation with somebody. I do want to add a lesson on Parivartana yogas, which I haven't taught here, and when we have exchanges of houses, they come up quite often. I think 1 out of probably 3 or 4 out of every 10 charts will have a Parivartana yoga, and you really need to understand how to use them. We want to go deeper into conjunctions, planetary clusters, Gemini aspects, Rahu and Ketu, but and then having a cookbook to put together how to do a chart, what to look for, and stuff like that. And then you have a week on rectifying charts, which comes up a lot, and then guiding clients through difficult Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu transits. I find that people don't understand Sati Sat well enough, and all the clients come in, oh, I'm afraid of my Sati Sat, and they think it's going to be 7 years of horrible things. And there's so many advanced rules on it. We really need to kind of, understand how to guide people through Saturn. And then for those of you who work with people professionally, having a lesson on Vedic counseling, how to work compassionately and loving with people, how not to confuse them, how to deal with high maintenance clients, and how to be humble and in service. So this kind of like I said, this course is a little bit like a Whitman sampler. We're going to get some coconut creams and some caramels and some chocolate mints in it. But the point is that I just wanted us to go deeper into a lot of things that we know, but we don't know well. Or if we know them well, we really have to get really versed on like explaining them well and finding ways to share what we see with somebody in a very kind of kind, compassionate, insightful way. And that, that's a whole skill. Today I'm just going to kind of give, I want to give some examples so you have some idea of how I teach. I'm going to go through some principles that some of you know, some of you don't know. A lot of it comes from Gemini astrology. So core principle, Scorpio is co-ruled by Mars and Ketu. And if we don't look at both of them and know how to decide which one is stronger, we often miss a lot of things. And so we have to go deeper into that. Aquarius is co-ruled by Saturn and Rahu. Now that most of you know that, but sometimes there's advanced rules around that. And then most people don't realize that Virgo is co-ruled by Rahu and Mercury, and that Rahu often is dominant. And if we don't look at Rahu as being very important when we look at Virgo, we often miss something. And then, Sanjay Rath even talks about sometimes Taurus is ruled by the moon, and Pisces has a co-ruler of Ketu, and sometimes those things affect Parivartana yogas. That's when you have these exchanges of houses. Now, I'll show you that in Lord Krishna's chart real quickly. This is I don't know, Sanjay somehow resurrected and got Lord Krishna charts right. July 19th. 3228 BC at 2342:40 in the morning, in the evening. He was born close to midnight. Taurus rising, that's been known about Krishna. It's got the exalted moon in the first, and again, here we have a debilitated Mars, and he was an incredibly fierce warrior. So, you know, we don't, and it's in the third, okay? But we have we have a Parivartana yoga, an exchange of houses between the first and the third house here, between the exalted moon and Mars, Venus, Rahu. Now, Mars, Venus, Rahu is, of course, a passionate placement in the third house for, you know, sexual energies, but also for being a passionate warrior. And so, you know, the heart of this being, you know, was this kind of passionate husband to, you know, thousands of gopis, and that he could somehow be in their different bedrooms at the same time with his magical powers. And at the same time, he was this, you know, most of his early years, he was this incredible warrior fighting these incredible battles. Again, Mars is particularly strong because it's Pushkara, it's in Jupiter's nakshatra, so it's in the early part of the sign. We wouldn't just say it was debilitated. And again, just a lot of passion here with Venus Rahu conjunction. But we also have a Parivartana yoga between the 7th and the 9th houses. Ketu owns Scorpio, Saturn owns Capricorn, so there's an exchange of houses between the 7th and the 9th houses. Again, Saturn and Scorpio actually, I heard a lecture recently, is actually very powerful for spiritual teachers. And Scorpio is kind of a deep diver, and Saturn, you know, has that very meditative side to him. So, but again, we've got Parivartana yoga between the 7th and the 9th houses, you know, showing the deep spirituality with Ketu and Saturn involved here. But when we study Parivartana yogas, most people don't understand. Most of them are good. We don't like Parivartana yogas between the 3rd, 6th houses, between the any house in the 3rd, 6th, the 8th, and the 12th houses, because they tend to create more difficult challenges. Again, Krishna has Parivartana yoga between the 1st and the 3rd, and I guess fighting all of those battles, and he was just, you know, a huge, incredible warrior, and he had to do all this kind of fighting in his early life. You know, it's not easy. So it was, you know, 3rd house is always about fighting anyway. So, but you know, it's not like fighting is always easy. But we've got 3, 6, 8, and 12. The exchange, we don't like Parivartana exchanges of houses. So we have to go into that in more detail. We do like, anytime we have Parivartana yogas between exchanges of houses between angle and trinal houses, or if we have the 2nd and the 11th houses, they create very good yogas. And then the problem is with yogas is that often they get modified by malefics. So if there's a malefic aspect or another malefic conjunction involved, it may not allow the yoga to happen. So I do want to spend some time teaching that in this Secret of the Masters class, and they're very important. They come up all the time. Okay, most of you know that who studied my Rahu and Ketu class. Rahu aspects the 5th and the 9th house from itself, but it also aspects 30 degrees or the next sign from it. And Sanjay Roth teaches this, and it's a very kind of key hidden piece of information. It also means that kind of Rahu transits for 3 years, because you know, we had Rahu in Gemini, and we had all this kind of smoke and mirrors with the media kind of making up all kinds of stories for forever. And then I remember some people were saying, oh, when Rahu goes into Taurus, it'll stop. And it didn't, because Rahu in Taurus was still aspecting Gemini. Now, if you've noticed, Rahu in Aries now is no longer aspecting Gemini. The media has changed a little bit. I mean, there's been, you know, we've had this whole thing happen with Twitter. We've had all these new media companies coming to happen because they don't like the censorship that's been happening in the media. And even CNN was just sold, you know, and is, you know, and there's in the New York Times, even I just was think last week published a more truthful article about what's really going on in Ukraine and how the U.S. I think they put out an op-ed that the U.S. should, be more cautious because it's a long, protracted thing. They were being very honest about it rather than being kind of propaganda, kind of cheering. So it's interesting that has happened. I have Rahu. Let's show you my chart real quickly. I'm never shy about using my chart, but it's easier to because I know it deeply. Okay, here's a north-south version. Although let's put up the Navamsha here. So here's my chart: Scorpio rising, moon in the first house. We've got Rahu in Sagittarius, where it's considered having kind of weak energy, although it's exalted in the Navamsha chart. And Venus, Rahu gets an aspect to Venus in my third house. Now, in my Venus period, I had a lot of sexual energy, and I didn't know what to do with it, and I certainly acted out on it. It finally kind of dissipated when I went into my Sun period. But Rahu Venus is also good for artistic creativity, which has come out in my writing in later years. But the Rahu aspect from the second to the third did create a lot of excessive sexual energy. Venus in the third house is very sexual. Rahu is just kind of increasing that energy, and sexual energy can also be creative energy, as your artistic energy, which can come out later in life. But Rahu in the third, so Rahu does aspect the sign next to it, and a lot of people miss that, and it's important. Now, Sanjay Rath says that Ketu doesn't have any aspects other than obviously the conjunctions. It's desireless. Aspects, if you studied my foundation classes, are about desires. Whoever a planet aspects is what we have a desire for. And, Venus aspects desire love, obviously. So does the moon. But Ketu is desireless. It only desires moksha or enlightenment. So we can't look at Ketu trine. Some people do, and I find that it's not accurate. We can look at Ketu conjunctions. We can look at Jaimini aspects from Ketu also, but we'll have to learn those, review those in a minute. Okay. So this is something I want to teach that I find that most people don't know. Now my students have studied it with me. When I first learned it in 2014, it was very life-changing. And Parashara talks about it. It's called Rashi Drishti, aspects from sign to sign. And most of us learn when we study basic Jyotish that Jupiter, we look at Jupiter trines, we look at the first, the fourth and the seventh and the eighth house aspects of Mars, we look at the third and the seventh and the 10th house aspects of Saturn, and we look at seventh house aspects. But those are the more important aspects are, and I call them anchor aspects, I've made that up, are what are called the Rashi Drishti. These are the aspects that are innate within the signs, and they stay there the whole life. The Parashari aspects, the ones I just talked about that most of us learn first, they come and go with transits too. So I have a Mars-Saturn opposition in my natal chart. It really, it's not like, it's kind of there all the time, but it really isn't. But if it shows up in transit, like when Saturn was in Libra, then it was like, very intense, and I felt it, or when Saturn goes into Aries, I'll feel it. But for the most part, this Mars-Saturn opposition doesn't impact me all the time, except when Saturn and Mars interact in transit. So these Parashara aspects that we learn are more important when they get re-triggered in transits. Now, so these signal aspects, they're easier to learn by looking. So basically, the the movable signs aspect the fixed signs, and the fixed signs aspect the movable ones, except in this case the one next to it. So Aries is a movable sign, so it aspects the fixed sign of Leo, the fixed sign of Scorpio, and the fixed sign of Aquarius. Okay, but it doesn't aspect the fixed sign of Taurus, which is next to it. Movable sign, fixed signs, in this case Scorpio, aspect movable signs, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer, but not the one next to it, Libra. So these aspects become important because then we miss a lot of things. Now we also have the dual signs aspecting each other. So all the dual signs, which are easier to see in the South Indian chart, which is why I just gave up on the North Indian chart, you've got the corners of the dual signs, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius. So they aspect each other and they cross back to each other. So the dual signs are easy. So any planet in a dual sign will aspect any other planet in a dual sign. So even if you have, let's say you have Jupiter in Pisces, it's aspecting whatever you have in Gemini. Even though it's not, it's a fourth house aspect, we might not look at it from what we learned in our traditional Jyotish classes. But in Jaimini, and Parashara talks, Jaimini and Parashara are identical because it's just Jaimini just expounded on certain things in Parashara in more detail. But Jaimini, Parashara talked about these. Now, I finally found a chart that shows that Brian Kurtzak put together that shows I call the kind of the lateral aspects and the corner aspects. And so this is, see, to me, this is why I started using the South Indian chart, because anytime you have a planet in Aries or Scorpio, they're aspecting each other. I call that kind of, it's like a vertical line. So you can quickly see that anything in Aries aspects anything in Scorpio, anything in Taurus aspects anything in Libra. So people miss that, and I'll show you an important example of why you can't miss it. When the corners aspect each other, again, you can just remember Aquarius and Aries aspect each other, Taurus and Cancer aspect each other, Leo and Libra aspect each other, Scorpio and Capricorn aspect each other. So you can see the kind of the corners are easy aspect each other, and again, these are the fixed signs aspecting the movable signs, etc. And then you've got, I call them lateral aspects. You've got, you go across the way here, Capricorn, Aquarius aspects Cancer and vice versa, and Capricorn aspects Leo. And so these aspects kind of stay with us most of our life, and we can use this whole system in the Varga chart successfully. Most people use Varga aspects improperly, and they try to, Hank Freeman wrote a beautiful article on this. You can't get away, trying to use regular aspects in a Varga chart, but you can use these what is called these signal aspects, and they're really important. So this chart's really important to learn, but the point is that you want to immediately begin to kind of recognize these aspects. Now, here's a chart that we studied in our medical astrology class. It's a chart of Linda McCartney. She developed breast cancer in her Venus period, very, very shortly at the beginning of her Venus period, and she died at the very beginning of her Venus period. Now, if you don't look at Jaimini aspects, you miss a lot of information. So normally we would think, okay, she's got a Malavya Yoga, she's got Venus in its own sign in Libra, so almost on top of the ascendant. Notice her ascendant's, I think, 10 degrees, and her Venus is, I'm trying to see, is that 10 degrees or 18 degrees? But anyway, it's very close still. She's got Mercury, which Lord of the Ninth, a benefic planet, in the ascendant, and she's got the Moon, Lord of the 10th, which is a okay planet for Libras in the first house. You would think it's a strong first house. I mean, if you didn't know very much about Jaimini astrology, and if you didn't use Rashi Drishti, why was the Venus period so vulnerable for her dying?
Saturn aspecting, Rahu aspecting.
K2 aspecting and Mars aspecting. Okay, so we've got Saturn in Taurus.
Mars is not aspecting, but unless you're talking about Prashara aspect.
It's got a Parashara aspect.
Yeah,
It's got a Parashara. It's got an 8th house aspect, right? But the Gemini, yeah, she's got 3 malefic aspects. Again, we can use a trine from K2 in Gemini. Aquarius does aspect Libra. So we've got 3 malefics. We've got 4 malefics if we include Mars, Harat Makaraka, aspecting, and Moon is breast, aspecting her first house. And what we learned in the medical astrology class, I mean, we can usually survive 1 malefic, or 2 malefics, but if you get 4 malefics, you're in trouble. But you see, if you don't look at the Gemini aspects, well, you're missing the Rahu aspect on Libra, which is actually very good for creativity. Again, she has Rahu aspecting Venus, very incredible musician. So Rahu is very, it messes up her emotional body, obviously, with Rahu aspecting her moon. So we've got the Rahu Venus aspect. We've got Jupiter and Saturn aspecting her ascendant, and Jupiter is not a good planet for Libra. It's Lord of the Sixth for illness, right? Saturn is Saturn, and it's a retrograde Saturn, and it's just going to cause problems. And then Cancer is often a combination of Rahu and Saturn, which creates kind of resentment, and it's affecting her moon. And then we have the K2 aspect, and we have a Mars aspect. So here's a case where now we generally don't like to see Sun in the 12th house for health anyway. So I mean, that is a general, kind of negative. But again, with unless you're using your Gemini aspects, you're just missing some very key aspects of this chart, and that's why. And I'm always surprised. I don't know why I think it's happening a little bit more because of Sanjay Roth now, but a lot of our beginning teachers are not teaching these sinal aspects, and they're talked about in Parashara, and they're everything because they tend to be there our whole life, as I said. So very important. So learn your Gemini aspects. Okay. Stellium. So here's another Whitman sampler. I guess we have a coconut cream coming up here. Stelliums, they do come up sometimes in charts. The stellium is when you get 5 or 6 planets clustered in one house. And people don't know how to read these charts, and we have to learn how to do that. Here's a chart of Charles Baudelaire. He's a very famous French poet. He translated Edgar Allan Poe, and his translations of Edgar Allan Poe are still beloved in France. He also wrote The Flowers of Evil, Le Fleur de Mal, a very famous series of poems, and he got incredible recognition for his poetry. And in the 1800s, poets were like rock stars. People read poetry for fun, and great poets were like the latest Beatles album on some level. But this is a very kind of intriguing chart. Again, we have Mercury, Venus, Saturn. We've got Pluto in there too, Jupiter, Sun, and Mars, all in Pisces in the 8th house. And we have Rahu we have a Kalasarpa Yoga. All the planets are hemmed in between K2 and Rahu, and that creates a very kind of predestined life. If you know anything about his biography, well, what again, some of you have, any thoughts on this chart before I say anything? Okay. Okay, we have Moon in the 12th, which is always kind of difficult for our emotional life. That's kind of like stuck. He had a very difficult relationship with his mother. What 8th house is also inheritance, and he's got Jupiter, Lord of the 8th, and the 8th. And at some point, he inherited a lot of money from his family, and he squandered it. he was an opiate addict. He was a sex addict. He was frequenting the prostitutes of Paris. He developed venereal disease and eventually died in poverty, and he was chased out of each place that he rented because he couldn't pay his rent. And it was a very kind of tragic life, and and he did have the poetic fame. So the stelliums, are interesting because, and I'll show you this in the, for those of you who know Ashtaka Varga. So the rule for stellium is that the energy from the planets in a stellium house flows into the house 11 houses away from it. So certainly, obviously, the 8th house is totally energized with 6 planets in it, but also the 6th house, the house 11 houses away, gets very energized. And you can see this in the Ashtaka Varga points. For those of you who studied, there are these points that are derived from planetary aspects. And I haven't taught this recently, I don't, but some of you know this. So you can, and this is, I got the Southern Indian up here, right? So the Northern Indian up here, but you can see that he's only got 21 Bindu points, which is below average in the 8th house, but he's got 48 points, which is about the most you can have. I think 48 is the most you can have. 24 is normal. I think 48 is the maximum number of points you can have. He's got 24 points in Capricorn in the 6th house. 48 points, okay? So you actually don't want a lot of points in malefic houses, and that's the rule with Ashtaka Varga. So in a sense, this Capricorn energy is totally enlivened. 6th house energy, debts, illness, vices, So even though with all that difficult karmic energy from the 8th house, it all flows into the 6th house of, illness, debt, addiction, you name it. And so stelliums, there are all these kind of rules for reading stelliums, and sometimes stelliums create very spiritual charts. I have a friend there's a big stellium in February of 1962 in Capricorn. We just had one a couple years ago too, and it tends to, it can also create very spiritual people. Again, it depends how the energy flows. Again, a Capricorn stellium is going to all flow into Scorpio. My friend who's got a Capricorn stellium, has gone to India like a dozen times and just is deeply devoted to, the Vedas and things like that. So it's very, but we'll study them a little bit because no one ever teaches them.
I have a friend with that same Capricorn. I had a friend with the same Capricorn stellium, February 1st, 1962. He was an adventurer. He did everything. He's a world famous adventurer. He 15 books written about him. Finally, he died cave diving. He died at age, I don't know, 47, cave diving. So also a very, very extreme life. Very.
Yeah, I mean, stelliums are quite interesting, and whenever once in a while you get people that have stelliums, and they have no idea what to do with their charts, and most people don't know how to read them. And there are ways you can read them, and I have an article and some rules on how to read stelliums. So it's something we'll learn as Secret of the Masters here. I'm give you a little sneak preview because I kept reading about it into the September class, which is part 2 of Secret of the Masters, and that's on dashas, advanced dashas. And this is something that I'm just, a lot of the stuff I'm starting to share is because I've been starting to use all these advanced things, and they help so much. For those of you who study dashas with me or who study dashas, they're very hard. Vimshotri dasha is actually very hard to predict anything with, really. I mean, you can, but it's actually very good. And half the time it doesn't work, and then people feel frustrated. And I've, Afi just mentioned this. I taught this in the last dasha class. If you have moon in the 2nd, 6th, 3rd, 11th, or 8th or 12th houses, Parashara tells us to calculate the dashas differently. So if you have moon in the 2nd and the 6th house, normally, those of you who know Vimshotri dasha, if you were born with moon in Mercury's nakshatra, you start your life in a Mercury period. But if you have moon in Mercury's nakshatra in the second house, you'd actually have to count 4 nakshatras from Mercury to get a starting dasha of probably Venus. Mercury, Ketu, Sun, I think I read that. Mercury, Ketu, Sun, Venus. Yeah, you'd be starting in your Venus dasha. And so when people use regular Vimshotri dasha, they just don't get the calculations right, and then they miss what's going on in the person's life. Now let me show this to you. I have a client. This is quite dramatic. Cancer rising, moon in the 8th house, so it's telling us that we should use what's called Adna Vimshotri dasha. That means we have to move the starting nakshatra 8 houses from. Normally he was born in Jupiter's nakshatra, Purva Bhadrapada. Should have been starting his life in a Jupiter period, but we actually have to move it 8 nakshatras. Anyway, there are programs now that do this, so you can calculate it by hand if you had to. But anyway, I had a client who came to me, and he was frustrated. He was a businessman, and this was in 2018, 2019. The people said, "Oh, your businesses are going to do fine." Okay, he's in a Mercury Jupiter period in regular Vimshotri dasha. We've got Mercury in the 3rd house, which can be good for business, having your own business. Jupiter is 5 houses away. Jupiter's in the 7th house of partnership. Even though it's in Capricorn, the debilitation's probably canceled. There's so many ways to cancel debilitation, but retrograde even cancels it a little bit. But anyway, he was told that his business would be very successful, and the opposite happened. Everything was falling apart. And when we run and again, we look at this Dashamsha chart also, Mercury is in the 9th house in its own sign, which should be good for business in the Mercury period, and Jupiter in the 3rd, which is not great. There's at least a 7 relationship here. And Jupiter does move 12 houses here, so we don't really like that. But in any case, people kind of read his chart and said, "Oh, your businesses should really take off. You're in a Mercury period. Mercury is a business period." And when we ran the dashas properly using Adna Nakshatra, Adna Nakshatra dasha, he's in a Saturn Ketu period. Now, if you know anything about Saturn, Saturn and Ketu are in his 12th house in the Rashi. In the career chart, Saturn and Ketu are also in the 12th house. Okay, and it's actually not very hard to say that. Well, one of the things you say about Saturn Ketu combinations is things fall apart. I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago. Ketu kind of, Saturn is kind of infrastructure, and Ketu kind of destroys the material to kind of move you to God, So whenever you have a Saturn Ketu combination, it's usually like a mess. Things fall apart. The only thing you can really do with it is do a lot of meditation and develop your spiritual life. And but you can see if you don't use the right dasha here, you get the completely wrong interpretation. And it's very obvious that there's a problem here with Saturn Ketu, running a Saturn Ketu period, Saturn Ketu in the 12th in the Rashi, and in the D10, and it's like, okay, no brainer for getting the prediction right. And he didn't tell me what was going on, and I ran Saturn Ketu, I ran Adna Dasha for him, and I said, I bet things have been really difficult for you the last year with business. And he said, you're not kidding me, And he had this whole series of partnerships falling apart and people screwing him, all kinds of things. So, it's kind of, this is, again, we learn Jyotish, and then we have to learn deeper things. And this is, so we're going to learn this in the September class on dashas. But I think one of the first things that I do when I look at people's charts now is that, you know, charts are a snapshot of time. You know, we have, I mean, charts, the seeds for our whole life is in the chart, but when is it going to sprout? What dasha is running? What are the transits, you know, triggering it? And lately I've been using like 4 or 5 different dashas because you can really get more accurate information. And once you learn the principles for them, they're very easy. So I always start by saying what dasha is running. We always have to rotate the chart around the dasha, and people forget that. That's the most important thing. I mean, if you're in a Jupiter period, Jupiter goes into the first house. If you're in a Rahu period, Rahu goes into the first house. And you have to read the whole chart from the rotated dasha lagna, and that's very important. I use Chara dasha a lot, which is we go through one sign of the zodiac every X number of years. I'll teach that in the fall also. And in Chara dasha, we, depending on what sign we are, we either go clockwise or counterclockwise. So I'm Scorpio. I started out in a Scorpio period. I went into Libra. I went into Virgo. I went into you know, Cancer. And when you look at your whole life through this rotated Chara dashas, I mean, everything absolutely makes sense. I mean, let's see if I can pull my chart up here. I have Chara dasha here, but Chara dasha is amazing. So, you know, I knew in a lot of Vimshotri dasha, but you know, I got married in my Moon Saturn period, and if you were to try to figure that out, if you know the rules of marriage, I mean, I couldn't predict I was going to get married, but I got married in my Moon Saturn period. And when we look at the Navamsha chart, well, okay, so we have Moon in the 7th. We have Saturn here with conjunct Venus. Now we can kind of see it a little bit if we really stretch, but normally, you know, you would not think that one might get married in a Moon Saturn period. Saturn and Venus are in a Partnivartana yoga, and that also had it. But you can, if you know advanced rules of Vimshotri dasha, you can figure it out. When we look at Chara dasha, I was in a Taurus period, which started at age 36 and went till I was 44. I got married in 42. I got married during Taurus Cancer, but Taurus is my 7th house. So, you know, that whole, and actually from 1990, when I was in my Taurus period, I was very part of a group, a relationship institute, and I was studying how to be better in relationship and how to help other people be better in relationship. And that all, you know, the chart swung into the Taurus period, and suddenly I was involved in relationship, and then I got married in my Taurus period. But
Barry, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you were looking at the Chara dasha and Taurus Cancer period, of course, Taurus is the 7th house, and then also they usually say the 12th has something to do with it, and in Cancer in the D9 is the 12th house. But
right.
Did you also look at the Tarabala movement, and when you looked at the Tarabala, did you look at Venus for marriage or Jupiter, you know, being in the 8th from your Moon Nakshatra?
Yeah, again, I didn't predict that I was going to get married, so I wasn't looking at this. I haven't gone back, and it's an interesting question, but sometimes things, the point that I'm going to table that for now, Effie. Thank you for asking it, though. I think part of the problem, Chara dasha is very easy to use once you learn it, and you can, you know, easily predict things from Chara dasha. And Vimshotri dasha, sometimes you're pulling teeth, you know. So one of the things that I always look at first is I always look at what dasha is running, what Chara dasha is running. Now I'm looking at Narayana dasha, which is very easy to use. And so I'm looking at 3 or 4 dashas, and I'm looking at the correct dashas. When I look at all of those, I look for coherence. And usually, like if somebody asks me a question about business or marriage, I can't usually always see it in Vimshottri Dasha, but if I look in Chara Dasha and Narayana Dasha and look at Vimshottri Dasha, again, I can see it together. So there's the importance of kind of losing multiple dashas. And now there are these dashas that are very specific. We'll also learn those next fall. There, you know, if you have, I don't have any specific dashas, but there are people, like if you have Libra rising in the Damamsha chart, there's a dasha that you can use for calculation. Or if you have Rahu in the 10th, there's a special dasha, and if you have Sun in the first house, there's a special dasha. There's about 10 of these, 10 or 12 of these special dashas, and the computer calculates them, and they work, and they're easier. And the interesting thing is you're always trying to pull teeth with Vimshottri Dasha, and then like you look at these other dashas that Parashara tells us to use, and it's easy. So I think dashas, I've been involved in dashas since 1987 because I was, you know, but now I'm kind of like, you know, after all these years, I'm finally kind of figuring out really, you know, if you use all the things that Parashara told us to do, and now we've got the computers to calculate them, dashas can be easy. You know? It's like, okay. I'm gonna do some. I want to give you another piece from the Whitman sampler. I guess we're moving on to the key lime chocolate mousse tart, I guess, or whatever. The Atmakarika, and I think the Atmakarika, which is the planet with the highest number of degrees in the chart, is probably the most important thing to talk about when you do somebody's chart. It's called the king of the chart, but people have misunderstood that. I mean, a lot of my early teachers used to only talk about it as being more important than the first house lord, but it's the chart of the soul, and the Atmakarika is interested in getting you enlightened, and he's not interested in you making a lot of money or having a good relationship or the things that we think we want to have in this lifetime. And so the Atmakarika will kind of pull the rug out from you to remind you that you're here to find God. And so it's really connected to the 8th house also. It's really, and it's the most important planet because it represents why we've come to the planet, what the karma in this lifetime is about. And if we don't help people understand their Atmakarika, we're kind of missing the core of what their life is about. You know, there's all these rules about Atmakarika. Maybe, well, I have an extra tape on it. I'll send it to you, and then we'll go over it in the class again. But Sanjay Roth says that when we say that the Atmakarika is the king, it's actually, we have to bow to the king if the king tells us that we have to learn this lesson. So it's not like it's the king of the chart, which is the ego, you know, like we're this great, the Atmakarika is great. The Atmakarika actually creates the difficult lessons our whole life. And we're often blind to the blind spots of the Atmakarika because the Atmakarika wants to take us home to liberation. The rule about Atmakarika is kind of, it's like a twisted, like when I teach it, it took me a long time to understand this stuff because all these, it's you know, you have to kind of work with people and then do a lot of extra research and then retranslate it. But so the Atmakarika, depending on the dignity, the aspects to it, the position of the chart, where it shows up in the Navamsha chart, it will show you the difficult lessons of this incarnation. And I'll show you mine just because, again, I know myself. So I have kind of a difficult one. I have Saturn Atmakarika, and it's in the 12th house, which is connected to expenses. Saturn is the karaka for work and actually for employees, or in ancient times they would say servants. And the good news is that I have Jupiter almost exactly aspecting my Saturn Atmakarika. Jupiter's at 26, Saturn's at 27, and there's even some advanced rules. Sometimes Jupiter can take over the Atmakarka at some point, which is somewhat happening. But the I have the Mars aspect from onto the Atmakarka, and it's in the 12th house, and I have Venus and Saturn having a Parivartana Yoga exchange of houses. Now, the advanced rule here is if you have a Parivartana Yoga with an exalted planet, it doesn't want to move. It's happy in Libra. You know, it worked really hard to get to Libra. It's not going back to Capricorn, no matter, you know, what Venus says, okay? So Saturn stays in the 12th. It doesn't move into Capricorn, but Venus does move into to Libra, which, you know, is powerful on some level. It's like I have Venus in Libra, and it really supports Saturn. But the problem is that Venus and Saturn in the 12th house create unconscious overspending. So part of my Atmakarka lessons is that I was making a lot of money and I was spending it all. I wasn't saving it. I would travel over the world with my guru. I must have gone on, I don't know how many trips around the world, to all of these foreign countries. And I loved it, and it was my life. And at the same time, I was unconscious of the way I was spending money. And then at some point when I had my Rahu period started and I had a lot of difficulties, the Saturn Atmakarka was saying, hey, you need to, you forgot that you came here to find God. And so I was going to push back into my spirituality when, the mortgage crisis took away my house, and there were I just went through a lot of Saturn Atmakarka lessons. But the Atmakarka, ultimately, it wants to get you enlightened, particularly in my 12th house. So it's, and we've got Saturn stationary today, and the Atmakarka is your best friend if you understand him, but you have to really kind of understand, it creates lifelong lessons. So like my biggest lifelong lesson involves employees. I've got, when you have Mars is in the 6th and Saturn in the 12th, it creates kind of difficulties between the Vedic texts say servants or something, but you have a lot of servants, but you have a lot of problems with them. So even after 35 years in business, even though I feel like I know how to manage people better and how to take care of them properly, I still seem to attract employees that have very difficult challenges that bring their challenges to my workplace. And I could tell you stories to make your hair turn up in terms of things that people have done. I mean, I had one secretary who was in charge of my finances who embezzled all this money, and we couldn't quite catch her, but she would walk in with a new diamond ring. It was we couldn't somehow figure out, we couldn't trace it. I mean, you get weird things like that happening. So but the Atmakarka is always kind of like teaching you difficult lessons. And I think when you do people's charts, if you don't really talk about the Atmakarka, then you run into problems. And each Atmakarka, so we'll have a more detailed lesson on that. I think it's so important for us to go really deep with it. Okay. I'm going to stop here for a minute. I have a lot of other things to do, but I want to maybe open up for some questions because I'll rest my voice. And I'm going to see if I can unmute you all. And I'll see if I can recognize. So you have an orange mic and it's got a line through it. So I'm unmuting you all. And by doing that, you should be able to touch your orange mic and turn it green. And when you touch your orange mic, you should be able to ask a question. So, and I know Deanna has a question. Can you get on there and ask it, or was it just?
Hello.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, the first chart you showed us, he had the moon on the ascendant, and I just wonder, is he a singer?
No,
no,
it wasn't. No, it wasn't. He has the moon in the 12th. Are you thinking the first chart?
No, the Navamsha. He had it in the Navamsha chart.
Right. Yeah, you would think he would be a singer. I think he does sing. I think he does play guitar. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Because that's the first thing that came to my head.
Yeah. Good.
Oh,
Good. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else?
I have another question.
Okay, Jan, go ahead.
For your Saturn at Makaraka, it's about suffering, but isn't it about helping other people who are dealing with suffering and health issues and things like that?
Right, exactly. So I've got Jupiter and K2 for Jyotish in the 8th, and my Jupiter's stationary actually. It's the Amachakarka for profession, aspecting Saturn at Makaraka. So yes, I using my Amachakarka, my career purpose to help alleviate suffering. Yes, when you have Saturn at Makaraka, you're supposed to help other people with their suffering, and that's what I do. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Good pickup.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, that's what I do. But I don't have any choice. If I do that, then maybe I'll get enlightened and Saturn will leave me alone, right? Saturn and I are good friends, He's my Amachakarka. He just wants me to get enlightened. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna mute you all again if I can figure out how to do that. So I'm gonna leave it off for now. I just muted you all again. Okay. So let's move on a little bit. So these are some of the core, when we start getting into kind of cookbooks of how to look at charts and what's really important. Like I said, I think the Atmaparka is really important. If the sun and the moon or the ascendant are strong, and you can overcome difficulties. So first, the most important things you're always looking at any chart is how strong is the sun, how strong is the moon, how strong is the ascendant and the ascendant lord, okay? Sometimes you get charts where all of those are incredibly blessed, and those people are incredibly successful people because those are the most important things and they all work. When you get the sun in Libra in the 12th and you get the moon in Scorpio in the 12th or the 8th and you get the ascendant lord, debilitated in the 12th or something, these people, they're in like why bother mode, they have so much, it's so hard for them to move through their struggles unless there are other things in the chart to help them. And if they've come to you at this point, you've got to like find ways to kind of help them. We always look at the moon. We had a whole class on the moon last year. Is the moon waxing, waning, or afflicted? I think, as I mentioned in that class, I think 80 or 90% of the people that I do charts for have an afflicted moon. It's so, when you start including the Jaimini aspects and the nakshatras and the Navamsha chart, the moon's always afflicted because it moves it, these people are spiritual and the afflicted moon moves them into meditation and wanting to get out of suffering. If you have an exalted moon and you live in Beverly Hills and you have all this inherited money and you don't have to work, you might have a wasteful life, but you're not searching for God, because you think you have it all, but you get people once in a while that have these really strong moons, and they're really good people. They have really big hearts, but the moon's always kind of afflicted someplace if you look closely enough, and that it's a call to action for spirituality. One of the things that I always try to decide is what's the theme of the chart. Where does the Lord of the first house go? And that most of you know that trick. Lord of my first is actually, well, it's two lords. I have K2, which is in the 8th house with Jupiter for spiritual teaching, and Mars, which is actually considered the primary lord of my chart because it's Lulak Trikuna in Aries in the 6th house. So that has created lifelong issues around death and healing and health. It's kind of a very funny placement for me because Mars is afflicted by Saturn, and in medical astrology, it's at a degree called Mitrabarga, which creates health problems. So I have had kind of not serious lifelong health problems. I've had lifelong health issues. And it's forced me to kind of study healing, and now I help other people get through things that doctors, can't find or try to cover up. But so the Mars in the 6th is about healing. I have a friend who has Mars in the 6th in Aries, Scorpio rising. He went on to be a medical doctor. I dropped out of pre-med because I couldn't handle the competition. That Saturn aspect was just too much. I couldn't compete with the pre-meds. But I was destined to become kind of this kind of healing, have this kind of healing profession, which also comes across, in other places. Sometimes it's thought that the owners of retrograde houses allow more free will. Sometimes it's also thought this is the case for even the kark of Jupiter retrograde. It's thought that if you have Jupiter retrograde in your chart, you may have more choices about whether you want to have children or not. A lot of people, have girlfriends and girlfriends get pregnant and they get married and they suddenly have children, and it kind of just happened to them. And that's, retrograde Jupiter may allow them to kind of suddenly to have more choices. What are the great years of the planets? This is sometimes something that's kind of forgotten. This is kind of ripening years. And I probably have to update this. Sanjay Roth and Misty Larson have slightly different interpretations of these. I think they're generally known. I mean, Rahu does ripen in the 42nd year. So 41 or 42, you have this huge Rahu energy kick in, and 42nd year of my life was probably the most significant year of my life. I got married, I moved to Sedona, I moved to the Southwest, which was kind of a Rahu area. I had all these problems with my business. I had, this is when I had all that craziness with the secretary who embezzled all this money. It was just, it was kind of, when Rahu ripens at age 42, it can kind of really kind of kick in all kinds of like crazy things. Saturn, everybody knows, ripens at 35, 36. So usually by 36, if you've learned responsibility, you've settled down, you've gotten married, you're keeping a regular job, Saturn's not going to bother you. If you haven't learned those lessons by the age of 36, Saturn's going to keep bothering you, right? So that's what Saturn wants to do. But these kind of key years are important. We need to spend a little more time, and I need to update them. But there's very advanced ways to work with them. People forget to look at the moon chart. Certainly for Cancer rising and for women, it's very, very important. There's so many times that we'll miss interpretation if we don't look at the moon chart, and it just gets forgotten. So always remember the moon chart. Rahu conjunctions within 10 or 12 degrees can accentuate and distort energies. So sometimes you have Rahu and you have a Rahu conjunction under the opposite parts of the sign, and it's really not that big a deal. But within 5 degrees, it's a huge thing, and within 10 and 12 degrees, it's important. We just completed our Rahu class, and Rahu has a lot of good things going for it. I mean, people, the Veda community in India doesn't like Rahu because Rahu goes against traditional Jupiterian religious values. But in modern society, we love Rahu, right? We love our rock stars. We love our politicians are very Rahu. Rahu kind of rules the world. We love the glitz and the glimmer and stuff like that. But Rahu creates a lot of material stuff. But Rahu, when it gets too close, particularly to certain planets, it's going to create difficult accentuations of the energy. But we just saw you know, in the chart, the early chart that I showed of my friend who was born in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I mean, he had a very tight Rahu-Mars conjunction. You know, one of the things that I just learned too, I was just doing some research, like you have a very tight Rahu-Sun conjunction. It can destroy ego. I mean, there's two ways that Rahu kind of reacts, and I think this is very kind of interesting. So if you remember my friend's chart, he had Rahu and Mars conjunct in the first, and I just had a client who had Rahu exactly conjunct the Sun in the 5th house. And they're both these people have kind of, I would say, low self-esteem issues. And Sun is an ego planet and Mars is an ego planet. And that close conjunction, Rahu can eclipse ego, and so they both have self-esteem issues. Now, we have seen in the case with Donald Trump where Rahu's Sun creates like the boastful ego, but his Rahu's Sun is, I think, it's a few degrees, right, Matthew? It's not. In any case, Rahu always kind of distorts things, but it's interesting that, and I hadn't really thought about it until this week when I was doing this chart, that Rahu can also create low self-esteem. I always think as Ketu creating low self-esteem, but Rahu, you know, they always go together. Rahu on top of Mars or the Sun, that closely can create this low self-esteem. And it could be that, you know, even Donald Trump, born to wealth, you know, deep down has low self-esteem also, and he reacts in a very kind of flamboyant, boastful way that nobody can stand. Whereas my friend basically has just subjugated his personal life to devotion to his wife. And in a sense, that's a way of subjugating his ego. And it may or may not work for him, but it's what he came to do on some level, you know. I don't know if he's going to have a crisis and break out of it. He went through the Rahu Ketu returns and nothing happened. So who knows, you know. I don't know when that's going to happen again. So if you have planets aspected by 2 or 3 malefics, you know, they're going to lose value. And okay, we saw that with Linda McCartney. She has 3 Gemini aspects of malefics and a Parashara aspect from Mars, the Lord of the 7th, on her ascendant. And you know, very complicated personality eventually, you know, 1st house affecting health. But we don't like a lot of malefics aspecting any house because it's going to lose value. And a lot of benefics we like will create more value. One of the things that I forget to do, and it's a very easy rule, and I forget to kind of teach it, is, you know, wherever Jupiter goes in the chart, it's going to expand. It's going to create wealth there on some level. And so whatever sign Jupiter is in, whatever house Jupiter is in, you know, is going to create this particular kind of mastery and expansion and great wealth there. And so in my case, I have Jupiter in Gemini, and I am good with everything Gemini. And even though Gemini is my 8th house, you know, I was a librarian, I was a professor of literature, I've written 5 books, you know, I'm a writer. It's like and I've got Jupiter aspecting Mercury here too. So it's like wherever Jupiter goes, it's just kind of accentuating the sign that it goes into and helping it be stronger. My wife has Jupiter in Libra, and she's a master at relationships, and she's amazing at counseling. It's her ascendant lord, but she you know, it just whatever sign it goes into, it kind of makes that sign really work well. All the values of that sign work well. And then also Jupiter in whatever house it goes into. Now, Jupiter in the 8th isn't great for your relationship with your gurus. It could create karmic problems, but in a sense, Jupiter in the 8th has made this, you know, 8th house is occult knowledge, it's meditation. So I'm a meditation teacher, the teacher of Jyotish. I have, you know, I've been very involved in all the white occult studies. I'm kind of a master of the occult, and that's because of Jupiter there. So always remember that wherever Jupiter goes, you can just quickly you know, people usually don't need to hear that because, like, you know, the things that you're good at, they don't ask about. You know, they know they're good at those things. They don't. You need to. It's like somebody walks into your office and they have a blue shirt, and you tell them they have a blue shirt or they like blue shirts or something. You know, it's like worthless. You know. So, but it's good to know if you're trying to kind of understand something that maybe they're not telling you. And sometimes people don't see their hidden Jupiter things. You know. I don't know what I was trying to say here. Remember to do transcending from the ascendant or manifestation. Okay, I don't know what I have to rewrite that point, and I can't even remember it. Point 12, are there planets being brought down by being too close to a debilitated planet or brought up by conjunct with an exalted planet? So I've seen this a lot. You get Mars conjunct Jupiter in Cancer, and that happened in certain years. And you know, you say, if you start talking about the person with a debilitated Mars, you get it wrong. There, you know, and we just had Mars Jupiter in transit. You know, Jupiter conjunct Mars totally uplifts that Mars and makes it very, very strong. And on the same time, the debilitated Jupiter Mars brings down that Jupiter. And if you talk about them having an exalted Jupiter, and they go, you know, they don't see it because Mars has kind of brought it down. So, you know, you have to remember conjunctions with a debilitated or an exalted planet can really have a strong upward or downward impact. They always look at the difficult nakshatras. You know, Ashlesha, Ardra, Mula, in particular, to me, are the three most difficult nakshatras to have. If you get a lot of planets in them, you always have problems with them. Particularly if they're like the chart lord or the moon or the ascendant lord or the Atmakarka. So it's very important to kind of look for those nakshatras. Okay, my voice is kind of running out of energy. Do you have any other questions? I'll unmute you. I kind of wanted to give you like a Whitman sampler, like I said, and my class is actually very coherent and very organized, but I had to kind of pull in a lot of different pieces from things that we're going to study, just to give you a sample. So I'm unmuting you all again. So if you have any questions, here's your chance.
I was gonna, Barry, it was very interesting what you said about wherever Jupiter goes, you know, you seem to have some type of talent, if you will, in that area. But also, wouldn't you say if Jupiter is retrograde or Jupiter is placed in a house that it may not be comfortable, that the talent might be distorted? And the example that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention is Putin's chart. Jupiter goes retrograde, goes into Aries in the 7th house. I can't imagine him being an expert or good at relationships. I mean, he's good at starting things, but not in a positive way. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
how would you describe it, especially if Jupiter maybe is retrograde or not placed in a favorable house?
So the first thing that I think we always have to remember, so generally retrograde benefics are stronger to do good, but we have to also look at their functional nature. I mean, we don't have accurate birth information for Putin. I have one chart that's Aquarius rising, in which case Jupiter's, you know, not a great, it's a money planet, second and 11th. The Libra chart, you know, Jupiter's not a good planet at all. Libra always have trouble with Jupiter. I don't think we have I don't know if we can talk about Putin because we don't really have an accurate birth date form, even though I get people that, have been using a certain chart. But in terms of the larger question, yeah, I mean, that's why we have to spend more time on all these kind of complex differentiations. If Jupiter is in a trick house, it still may help it. Like Jupiter in the 6th will actually kind of what we learned when we studied Secret of the Houses is that it may help the 6th house and prevent health issues, but the Karka values for Jupiter get destroyed. So it may have problems with teachers, or may have problems with children, or something like that. So even though even Jupiter in the 8th, like I said, I have Jupiter in the 8th, and it's enhanced my occult abilities, my esoteric astrological abilities, my healing and my meditation abilities. Absolutely, but it does create. I don't have any children, and I couldn't have children. I have had problems on and off with gurus and teachers, and even my dissertation advisor. So it kind of can destroy the Karka value, even though it still can help the house somehow. It's kind of a funny thing. Good question. But we always have to look at the rising sign and to see if it's a functional benefic or a functional malefic too. So Libra and Taurus and Capricorn, it's always a much more problematic planet. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was actually looking at, you don't need to bring up my chart, but I was also looking at my chart. Jupiter is at like 1 degree in Gemini, and I don't think that I have a good grasp at anything that has to do with Gemini, which is literature. And sometimes I think, because sometimes I think that I think too much, or
Right.
things like that. But and I'm not good with relationship, because Jupiter is in the 7th house as well. So I don't think I have a good grasp at that idea. So I'm kind of battling with that concept of wherever Jupiter goes.
It is the chart, Lord. It is going into kind of a Marka house. I mean, and we have to look at it in the Navamsha chart, which moves into Libra Navamsha, right? So,
Correct.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have to do in this class is that we have to come up with cookbooks, because we have all these rules, and then we have to look at like 5 or 6 things to decide what's really happening, which is why I brought up, that chart at the beginning of the class. It's just, when you first look at it, it looks like, the person, has this horrible life, but it's not the case. So,
did he, your friend or whoever that person is, the first chart that you brought up, and maybe externally his life is well, but you say that because he has decided to meditate and really focus on spirituality, the inner world is not as disturbed as it would have been had he not started meditation. And
I think that's the case. I mean, it is Moon in Ardra Nakshatra, so I mean, I'm sure I didn't get his full history. I mean, I'm sure anybody with that kind of a chart must have had a troubled 20 or 30 years. But again, also and also that's why we always have to look at the Navamsha chart, because it's much richer. And but to me, the chart, what's the chart about? It's a chart of service. It's the Lord of the 1st and the 12th. If he recognizes that his life is about service, it's actually, he does spiritual service work. He does service work to take care of his wife, who's a spiritual teacher. you know, by doing all those things, he's kind of fulfilling his destiny. And yet, you know, I can't imagine that there are frustrations that don't come up at sometimes, you know, just because any man, you know, wants to kind of achieve something. And yet when I look at that debilitated Mars, it's conjunct Rahu, it's almost like it allows the ego to surrender, you know, and that can be a beautiful thing. And that's actually, so it's just a different way of looking at the chart. If he really wanted to be a somebody, his chart is really a mess because it's blocked from being a somebody, because, you know, there's some, but if he's learned to subjugate his ego in service, which he has, then the chart works. So he kind of figured out how to get it right on his own, and I think it was the grace of guru and of meditation that helped him. But yeah, it is a troubling chart. You know, you know, and just a quick thought. You know, Gemini is also the intellect, and you do have a brilliant intellect. So Jupiter and Gemini is giving you a brilliant intellect, even though maybe it's excessive. You know, but that's more your Mercury in the 12th.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mercury in the 12th is excessive thinking, but interestingly enough, I'm in Rahu Saturn period, and I've, for some reason lately, I have been really focused more on spirituality and moksha than on material. I kind of waver and go back and forth, but every time my mind goes to material wants and needs, I pull it back.
Okay, so that's good. That awareness is probably helping you. That's very nice. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions? So the actual first lesson, I usually have a larger starting time, but because I was on vacation for about 5 weeks and I had other things kind of, I'm starting the class. The class does start next Saturday at noon. So if you'd like to enroll in it, I will send you a link. I mean, there's links in the newsletter, you know, where you signed up for the GoToWebinar, and then when the videotape comes, it'll have a link also to sign up for the course. The course is a little hard to find on my website. I didn't put it in a prominent place. So if you have trouble signing up, just email me, and you know, we can have the office manager help you with that. But Kathy or Joy, do you want to share any experience about my classes with people who don't know me?
Yeah, I can go first, and then if Joy wants, she can go next. So I have been taking classes with you, Barry, for many years, and I keep coming back because besides the fact that you have a brilliant mind and a lot of knowledge about Vedic astrology, it's your teaching method that I prefer over some other teachers that I've had in the past as well. And the method that you use is you allow the student to practice, and you guide them in class. Well, first of all, the classes are live. So if there's wrong thinking, you can gently correct that thought process or idea. But I think the experience of allowing us to practice on charts, I mean, that's how you learn, practicing on charts, because just lecturing and it's not going to be enough. And then you're not punitive either. If somebody's wrong, you like gently correct them. And the other thing is you repeat ideas and show certain concepts in different charts, which helps with understanding and learning that you have a big heart. You're very caring. I just love your teaching style, and that's why I keep coming back, because I've learned so much from you throughout the years, and I hope to learn more and more.
Thank you, Effie. That was very kind. Troy, did you want to share anything? Maybe she had to go because it got late. I don't know. Yeah, she's still here.
My mic was early on locked, so maybe her mic is locked.
I'm just trying to unlock it. Oh, self-muted. So you're Joyce self-muted.
Yes,
Okay.
I finally, yes, I'm here. I couldn't unmute myself. Okay. I've been taking lessons with Barry for the last 2 years. I'm a Western astrologer for the last 15, maybe a little more. And I just love the way Barry brings ideas and points that can easily be integrated and can be dovetailed between the two different systems. I've learned so much. It's allowed my readings to become much deeper, much richer. Even though I'm not a great Vedic astrologer, I have a lot of notions of the concepts because of Barry. His teaching methods are very clear, very concise, and he gives you little pieces of knowledge that you just don't find anywhere else. And it's like, aha! It's wonderful. I'm really very happy with everything I've learned from you, and I'll continue taking your courses, and I hope everybody else will too. They'll love it. Okay, that's pretty much says it all.
Thank you, Joy. Appreciate it. Well, I think I have some other, anyway, so it's very hard for me to self-promote. I mean, if you get to know me with that, I'm actually very shy at heart. I'm in a Rahu period, so I can't be, I'm not supposed to be shy, but I'm always kind of struggling between self-promotion and shyness. So it's my favorite thing in the world to teach these classes, and I don't do it for money. I mean, my classes are very inexpensive. They're about $25 a lesson. If you need a payment plan, I can always work with you on that. Most people have credit cards, so they let the credit card company be their payment plan. But if you need a payment plan, I'm more than happy to work with you. And again, this is part of a series that's starting. And for those of you who don't know a lot of Vedic astrology, I'm calling this like an advanced beginning class, because it's kind of like I said, it's important for us to review basic things that in a more accurate way with more examples and more case studies. So, that's what I'm hoping to do. I mean, I'm sure we'll have a whole lesson on exalted and debilitated planets and retrogrades and their aspects and all the combinations. And it gets kind of complicated because Vedic astrology gets to be, like I just gave an example. You get this exalted Jupiter conjuncted debilitated Mars. Well, what do you do with it? Well, Mars gets uplifted and Jupiter gets taken down, and you see this in examples. And so we have to, in teaching this material again, I want to kind of, so if you're newer to Vedic astrology, I know some of you are, you won't get lost in the class. You'll just learn some deep things, some core things in a very deep way that you'll carry with. And if you're an advanced student, you'll have a good review and you'll have a lot more depth of experience. So I just want to share that with you.
Barry, one question that you probably is something that you want to let the students know. When you go on the website, if you want to join this class, and it's not on your website, I couldn't find it on your website, so you suggest sending an email to barry@appliedvedicastrology.com and ask for assistance in registering for this class?
Yeah, I mean, I have, it is on the website, but it's under, if you get my newsletter, and just about all of you do, there's a link on the newsletter to click through to the place on the website. If you go, it's under courses, and then at the bottom, it's under Secret of the Masters, and then there's like 5 classes listed for Secret of the Masters. You have to click on Secret of the Masters. So it's not easy to find, and I lost my webmaster, and so I can't put it on the front page prominently, but I will send everybody who's on the presentation a link if they want to register, and they can email me if they have trouble. Thank you for reminding me about that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I found it. It's the Secret of the Master's Techniques That Make a Difference, Part
Right.
1.
Yeah.
But an email would help as well.
Yeah. No, I get it, and I messed up, and I haven't had that much. Again, my Saturn out McCartney, I haven't had the right support. With the, sometimes if you have to do everything yourself, you just run out of time. But I'm kind of in that boat at the moment. So, but yes, thank you for reminding me, and I will make sure everybody gets an email. And if you don't get an email and you want to take the class, and again, if you're not sure you want to take the class and you need to talk to me, that's, you can send me a text. We can have a brief conversation. I think, the way I teach, I think, even if it on some level be advanced principles that are basic principles, but then it's also going to systematically give you a cookbook on how to go through a chart and what you do to kind of figure out how to evaluate things in a chart. So trying to the goal is to be kind of systematic, eventually come up with a systematic approach in a cookbook. And for those of you who've taken my classes, sometimes I'll come up with a cookbook at the end of the class, which I use them all the time too, because I can't remember the class, and I pull out my cookbook and I'll remember the whole class because of the cookbook. And so we'll have some nice cookbooks for how to do charts. Good. Any other questions?
Barry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, hi, Deanna. How are you?
Oh, good. Hi. Good. Yes. I kept looking for the mic and I couldn't find it, but I went up to the menu and pulled down menu to audio, and I was able to unmute myself. So,
Oh, great.
so anyway,
Good.
yeah, I had a few questions along the way, but that's okay. I will just share a little bit about my experience with your classes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I've taken a little bit of a break from doing some classes this past year with Barry, but did several series prior to that, and it's a great supportive environment for sure, where we can participate and share our questions, our comments. I mean, it may be possible even to bring some example charts. I don't know if that would be something you'd be open to, Barry, but it's
Yes.
it's been a really great review this morning, just to, there is so much knowledge. It's advanced enough that it's interesting, but very accessible. And like you said at the beginning, if we're not keeping this knowledge, fresh and continuing to learn, which I'm always learning anyway, but in this class with you, it's really, really great as a review and to learn new things. So I'm really looking forward to the class, and I did have some questions come up along the way.
Okay.
But
yeah, we'll be continuing next week.
yeah, of course.
But yeah, thank you, Deanna. I've missed you too. It's been it's very funny because I'm 66 now, and for those of you, when you get into your 60s, you don't remember stuff as well. I was talking with Andrew Foss, and he's almost 70 now, and he was praising Visti Larson. He said, "Oh, you remember all this stuff."
Right.
And, 12 or
20 years younger. Yeah. Yeah.
And Andrew's had like, 12 or 15 years of study, and yet, it's very funny. I'm finding that I can't pull it off the top of my head like I used to, but I can. But at the same time, by teaching the classes, it's also like it makes it lively for me again. When I'm doing readings lately, it's just like in the class that I just did, it's like I suddenly see, all these things that I might not have talked about. So I just it's good. I think that's why we always have to keep going back, because it's kind of Jyotish is like the ocean. It never is quite. We can never finish exploring.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm turning 66 in a couple months, so I'm
Wow.
with you on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is great. And I am doing quite a bit of reading, so I feel like it's really important to have a place to dialogue about it. And so yeah, really grateful. Love your classes. I do hope that when you're able to, if it works with your presentation, if you'd be willing to include the North Indian style chart as well. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be helpful, just because I'm a bit bilingual, but it's a visual process, right? And so having both charts, I can read the South Indian chart, but the North one is my first language, so to speak, and I just would appreciate that, because
No, I will do. I've done that in my last class. I always have somebody who needs the North, and I did North for 30 years until I just switched because of the Jaimini aspects, and I just couldn't
yeah,
catch all the Jaimini aspects immediately in the North Indian chart, because you have to remember Leo aspects, Leo aspects Capricorn, and so it's just I can see them immediately in the South Indian, so that's why I
yeah,
switched. But I do bring. I always have somebody who needs them, and I know what you're talking about. I had a class that they were forcing us to do East Indian charts, which is like completely different scheme, and it was like, oh my God, what is this all about? So,
yeah. Well, it slows down my processing, but at this point, I mean, I definitely see what you mean about the Jaimini aspects. That's very cool how they all line up that way. But for me, looking at the North Indian chart, I identify things in the Kendras quicker, and
yeah,
the Konas. It's just, I know it's confusing for people who aren't familiar with the charts at all because of the numbers of the signs, right? And thinking that if you've got a Scorpio rising, that the 8th house is at the top because they put those little numbers in. But in any case, it's great to hear you, and I look forward to the class, and I
good.
know I'll learn a lot, as I always do. So
Yeah, it'll be good to have you back.
thank
Good.
you. Yeah.
Anybody, any other questions?
Oh, and Laura, she's having technical issues this morning, so she just wanted you to know that she can't speak up because she's on an alternate computer and having
Okay,
some issues.
you give her my love. Hi, Laura, and then we'll figure that we'll get the
Good.
technology out by next week. Mercury's direct now. No problems.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, Barry, you just said Mercury's direct. I've been having problems registering, so if you could send the invoice, that would be great.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Saturn went retrograde.
Yeah,
Yes, I was just going to say Saturn's retrograde.
Saturn's technology also. I mean, I think, like you said, we get a break from when we get the other one. It's very interesting. Okay, any final Jeopardy answer here? Anything? So, anyways, it's been wonderful. Let's see if I can bring up the website. I'll show you where it is. If you
I found it. I just couldn't register. I don't know why.
well, it may be. I need to know that because it could be that the link isn't working, and that's I need to know that.
But it could be just me.
Well,
I've been having so much difficulties lately.
it's under courses, and it's under, actually, it's under live webinars, actually. And then it didn't get put here, but see at the bottom here, it's under Secret of the Masters, okay. And that's a whole series. And I don't even have them all up yet. But then, so then this is the one that we're taking, and we click on it, Secret of the Masters. And let's see if the cart works. Add to cart. View cart. Okay. Well, it worked for me, but again, I didn't. So did you hit proceed to checkout and it wouldn't check out?
I did, and it wouldn't. And well, I mean, it would check out, and I kept hitting PayPal, and it says problems, and I can't even log on. So I don't know if it's
Yeah. Okay.
just.
Okay. So I'll send you an invoice.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. So next week, same time, 12 o'clock, and we'll have more fun. And if you those of you register early, I'll try to get you extra tapes and PowerPoints to study ahead. That's one of the things I try to give you. For those of you who have more time, there's often an extra tape to watch or an extra PowerPoint to read through, and I always send those to people who have more time to study. If you just have time to come to class, you can always do that too. Okay, have a great rest of your Saturday, and we'll see you next week. Take care.